I used to count dollars for a living. Now I stack records to the ceiling. Dodging all these villains, never catching feelings. Catch me in the wave, best believe I'm chillin'. Yo, my father told me better, so I'm never chasing cheddar, never chasing greed. Get up on your knees, I'ma need you to pray better. Think you flying higher than every person at Coachella. Please, could you stop? Every time you spit a line, you be thinking about them profits, thinking about deposits, forget about the process. Focus on your mind and close both eyelids. Yo, you need to turn the lies and vocalize these potent lies. Why you telling lies, selling pies in the skies? You a snake in the skies and I despise it. Hope you drop it. Use your brain, don't you know you got logic? Yeah. Yo, use your brain, don't you know you got logic?
Use your frontal lobe, don't be dumb.
Use your brain, don't you know you got logic?
Use your frontal lobe.
Use your brain, don't you know you got logic?
Diamond blank, pull up, pistol swing, gang bang.
I'll be tripping, never winning, always sinning. My ascension just beginning, and I'm feeling independent, yeah. And I'm feeling independent, yeah. Found myself in the low space, young black man with a court case. Finna no last rat race. How pussy live with a safe face, but I'm day to day till I fade away. Till the pain away, just skate away. Living off 808s, can't really smile, gotta cape my face. Been sad for a while, so new day. On top of my game like a toothpaste. Spin these fine like a toothpaste. Don't sleep on the spot, boy, it's too late. Hard to fade away, left hand with the J. I'ma save the day, maybe paid away. I'll be tripping, never winning, always sinning. My ascension just beginning, and I'm feeling independent, yeah. And I'm feeling independent, yeah.
Talking about the money, yo, we talking about the clout. I ain't got no money, so I'm on the same amount. Sleeping on my mama couch, I need to figure out. Need a different route, need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Making money, counting money, paper chasing, losing money. Never saving, I'm a dummy. Bankers laughing, I'm so funny. But please don't laugh at me, still ain't got no salary. Numbers going down with the casualties. I can stay thin when autumn leaves, but I'm off for these. They don't offer weed, they just offer stress, never offer keys. If you found them all, then it's all for me. If you got it lost, then it's all for he, or it's all for her. Never offer perk. Gotta stay calm when I'm off for work. Get my mind too blind from the off for dirt. I could write 4 rhymes and it all could work. Wait. That ain't real, what you feel, what's your deal? Why you broke? You ain't broke, you just spend for the thrill, ayy. I count on zero, still smiles on pillow, tryna vibrate willow. Pay no mind to the rhymes I riddle. Waste no time, can't play no middle. Gotta jump the fans, gotta check the mans, gotta choose a side, gotta make amends. Please don't switch when I'm making ends. Please don't switch when I'm making ends. What we talking about? Talking about the money, yo, we talking about the clout. I ain't got no money, so I'm on the same amount. Sleeping on my mama couch, I need to figure out. Need a different route, need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Need a different route, man, I need to figure out. Wait, yeah, just gonna let this ride. This beat's way too smooth. Bounce me now, just bounce me now. Yeah. Bounce me now, just bounce me now. Oh, what? Bounce me now, just bounce me now. Welcome, Mr. Holmes. You have just woken up into the program, ever present. Hope you find it wonderful, because your brain will be asleep and your imagination will be limitless. At this time, you can create what you want, feel what you want, and be who you want. There are no boundaries, there are no rules. As long as you remain calm and at peace, you will become Orma'a. Enjoy, Mr. Holmes.
You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Peace. You're now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Herut, and got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Brother, same old same. Keeping my eyes to the sky, ears to the street. What about you, King?
Hey, man, like I said, just trying to make my next day better than the last day, taking it step by step, trying to improve, just trying to get like you, my brother. That's
It takes the long way, brother.
Indeed. But before we get too far, I want to remind you all to make sure you like, subscribe, and share this episode, share this channel to your people and all your friends and everything like that. And I also want to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Calapusha Astrology, and our good people over there on Patreon. Big up to y'all. We had fun last week. We had that Patreon exclusive show. We're going to be doing that weekly. Thursday seems like a good day, so be on the lookout for that. I'm going to tell you what time we'll check in and do something on Thursday or whatnot, pick a different topic, or maybe, we'll get creative with it and stuff like that. So that seemed like that had a good response. So definitely big up to y'all. As far as getting a hold of us, firstly, you can follow Cosmic Convos at Cosmic Convo, CosmicConvo at that's on Instagram. And you can follow Push It Forward Media Group on Instagram at Push It Forward PUSHITFWD on Instagram. And from there you can get to the link tree, see the website and everything like that. You hit the link tree, you can see, you can find the Patreon. If you're interested in Patreon, you can, find the website if you want to get your chart, different things. And there's even a link on there to get at Rob or Ross. Specifically, how can the people get a hold of you?
Yeah, if you want to have your chart, further analyzed from the printout that you receive, or if you want information that we don't necessarily just afford you from the general data that we give out or that you pay for, you can always hit me up at calapurushastrology@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on Facebook or IG via Shechem Ra as well. So if you're interested, if you want to know more, get further in detail, and really kind of comb through some of the information, let me know. We can work something out.
Indeed. So here we are at episode 19. Or whatnot, last episode, we got a good response on that, man. A lot of people really like that breakdown, coming fresh off the Super Bowl. And a lot of people was like, man, what's up with this dude, Tom Brady, man? Where does he come from, man, with all this, all this winning and stuff like that. So that was right on time to go ahead and talk about that and stuff like that. So that was an excellent breakdown there or whatnot. And for those who are not patrons, we expounded on it a little bit more through a different system. So if you're interested in that type of stuff or whatever, go ahead and check us out on Patreon or whatnot, But what did you think about last episode, Ra?
It was really good. There was a couple of people that I know on IG that really liked it. That really, because they're Tom Brady fans. So they
Yeah.
really enjoyed it and spread the word as well. So definitely got some interesting comments just from the shared. Um, there's kind of like a split. Either you love or you hate Tom Brady. It seems so. They
Yeah.
were asking me, "Do I see cheating in his chart?" Nah, I said, "Look, I'll refrain from even going there on that one, right?" But yeah, definitely got a couple of surprising questions in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, like I said on the show, I'm not necessarily like a fan of Tom Brady in that way, but I'm a fan of someone good at what they do.
Exactly,
You
exactly.
know what I mean? I like to see people, be good and achieve, in the fields and the different things that they're into. So I don't take it personal like that.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Indeed. This week we got a question. We got a couple questions or whatnot. You want to talk about? Want to answer some questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So again, if you're interested in answering the question, asking a question that will be answered on the show, again, hit us up on Patreon, and we will answer that question. So we got one of our patrons wanted to know, could we do a show on the Civil War and look at the different placements that was set up during that time period? We did touch on this a little bit. We had a whole show on war, and if I'm not mistaken, we did talk about the Civil War briefly. We covered more than so. We did World War II, World War One, Civil War. We covered a couple different segments in there, but maybe I could see why somebody would ask that question, right? Because it's it appears to be there's a schism going on in the country. When you have an election where you have over 70 million people vote for each candidate, then it's clearly a divide, and where the country's at, politically. So I'm pretty sure that that's what's driving that question or whatnot. But what do you think?
Well, yeah, the Civil War has, of course, any war, any major world altering event has astrological connotations. So we always can explore that as a topic. We did touch on it briefly in one of the shows. We would really have to really get into more of America's chart
Yep.
because it's a it's a civil war, so it's internal, and so you really have to look at the chart of the nation. But the chart of the nation is polarized anyway,
Hmm.
right? It's a Sagittarius ascendant, which is a dual sign, which are automatically by nature polarized.
Yeah.
And then the ascendant lord is in the seventh house of Gemini, which is polarized. In fact, it has four. America has four planets in Gemini,
Yeah.
which really talks about the polarization and the kind of dualistic aspect that America provides. So we've covered some of that. I think we've mentioned some of those things in previous shows, but you know, um, this country is built on polarization, black and white.
Hmm.
Um, you know, uh, England versus the colonies. It goes on. Even the music that we listen to is polarized.
Yeah.
In a hip hop genre, you have the West Coast and the East Coast. Then you have the North and the South. I mean, even gangs are. Everything in this nation is polarized.
Yep.
The voting system is polarized.
Yep.
So you know, to
Two
have
party
North and
system.
South, it's a two-party system. So when you have North and South going at odds, that's kind of just a systemic kind of manifestation of what this country embodies. And this country embodies, dualism. In fact, in the Masonic lodges, the floor of the lodge is are black and white checkers.
Yep.
Um, you have to, consider. most of these things are dualized, and it's for a purpose. One won't get
Yeah.
into that purpose, but there is a reason why these things are done. So, just to take that in consideration, the war is just a byproduct of the way the nation has been formulated from day one.
Well, you know, that kind of brings us into our topic today, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
that's right on time, right? You know, not necessarily Sagittarius, but that dual nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the dualism and stuff like that. So shoot, let's go ahead and jump into it, right? We're here at another astrological age show.
Yes, we are.
We're starting to get, deep back into history at this point, where the contributions are not as well known. Dates start getting a little funny a little bit, but there are some key things that we can definitely, fixate on and say, hey, this is what was achieved during this time period.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that brings us to the Age of Gemini.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Long awaited, right? So, hotly debated. So Gemini, we covered the age of Taurus. I think we did a beautiful job on that. As you stated, the further back you go, the harder it is to kind of really exhume or really look at things from a perspective that really ties you into the significators that the sign represents. But there are telltale signs, right? In every age. And, one of the things that we do is we kind of one of the benefits of studying ancient Kemet is that the way the civilization was structured, for the most part, was a direct reflection of the ages and the heavens as they move. And so we discussed obviously the age of Aries in regards to the ram, the bull is Taurus. When you get to Gemini, Gemini is actually a human sign. So, what would you use to represent, humans, but humans? And one of the themes that comes out of Kemet is the sense of the theme of duality. In that you had, before the unification, two lands,
Yeah.
upper and lower. And having two lands, you had two rulerships, right? Two formulated cultures for the most part. One culture is closer to the sea, the Mediterranean, and the other culture is further inland. You have a different ways of life. One considerably further to the south is more matrilineal, and then the one to the north is more patrilineal. And so, with these particular dynamics, there was a exacerbated split between two sides of one nation. In fact, several nations, because we must understand the Nile encompasses many nations: Ethiopia, Sudan, right, which would actually be Upper Kemet proper, if you will.
Yeah.
And then also Libya, right, which is to the east of Kemet. But Libya was also a very prominent integrated aspect of Lower Egypt.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, even when you get down into the opposite side, like getting into like Mozambique, Tanzania, or down. This is where like cradle cradle.
This is where the mountains and the moon are. This is where the formulation of the Nile begins when the White Nile, right, forms,
Mm-hmm.
and of course creates cataracts.
Mm.
But also when the Blue Nile and when these two form, right, which create the proper Nile proper. This is where that kind of splitting begins to happen, and that's when you have, because the Nile is a beautiful thing. It carries culture down through it with it, right? And so the
Yeah, I gotta
inevitable
do that one
process,
day.
yeah,
I
definitely,
had to take a boat ride down the Nile one day.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, that's
Indeed.
something I definitely intend on doing. Um, so that was just a telltale kind of sign, if you will, that this age is what the age of Gemini was in play, and Kemet, attempted to either by default or intentionally replicate that age as far as its rulership is concerned. And so, one of the other things that we begin to notice, because the age sign of Gemini itself would indicate many things in regards to its significators, one of which is the inculcation of writing.
Yeah.
And, Kemet starts off in the first dynasty with a complete writing system.
Yeah.
What
Yeah. I
that
mean,
doesn't yeah, it's not a quick thing.
no. No. I mean, yeah, because by the time when they start finding artifacts and different things like that, I mean, that didn't just happen overnight. This that's been happening for a
No,
long time.
no, absolutely not. In fact, there's a one of the other telltale signs of the age of Gemini is an increase in tools and weapons,
Yeah.
especially tools. And one of the cultures that was in existence in that area is called the Fayum A culture. And that culture gave a rise to the Merimda culture, which existed between 5,000 to 4,000 before the Common Era. And a lot of these artifacts were found from this culture were found on the West Nile.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one of the things is that they begin to create pole framed huts, right? Which literally sustain and hold off from the wind, right? Um, they created walls and encampments, right?
Mm-hmm.
They used uh, a lot of clay jars. They began to create granaries. So, tools would begin to really come in fashion. And the reason why we point to tools is specifically because Gemini has an affinity with the third house in
Yeah.
astrology.
Yeah.
And the third house is directly connected to your hands.
Yep.
Um, so, at this time, of course, agriculture was still, of course, being developed from a technological standpoint, but
Yeah.
there was definitely a lot of developments and technology that um, really took off. Grindstones, which you
Yeah.
use with your hands, right, was one of the other things that they found. Ceramics. So, and this is all in the West Nile between 5,000 to 4,000 before the Common Era, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, things such as chairs, tables, tools
Yeah.
were or have been and still are being excavated, right? In regards to the Merimda culture and the Fayum A culture. So, when you understand that, right, this is to show that this is the age that was really inculcating and ushering those changes in man. Um, in fact, um, in Wadi Digla, which is a cemetery in Kemet, they found improvements in storage jars where we kept items, and also they also found weaponry, right, at the site. And so they're saying that this is an improvement on the previous cultures that existed in the Nile. So at this time, we see an increase and a boom, right, in those types of artifacts. So that really shows, right, that this is a telltale key indicator that this is the energy that is in play. And remember, we
Yeah.
have two kingdoms at this time. Now, the other thing is that um, around the world, and particularly in India, you find a lot of reference to invasions. They talk about the Aryan culture coming down at this time in droves. And there were two invasions, one right around 4000 BCE, right at the cusp when the Age of Gemini is ending. Because we conferred that the dates were right around 6300 to 4100 before Common Era, right?
Yeah.
Right, give or take circa a few years, right?
Yeah.
So, this is when, right, those particular shifts of cultures, and you must understand, Gemini is a sign about movement. It's a sign about changing and reacting to situations. The intellect is literally connected to Gemini, and this is akin to the brain and the functions of man as far as his ability to maneuver increasing. Meaning, not to say that we came up with advancements as far as um, transportation, but we were on the move. Man was on the move a lot more,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, Shifting, and I'm not talking about mass migrations. I'm talking about things that are akin to moving around in your respective area. Although at that time that was a very great venture, to us now today we recognize it's still very small in regards to traveling, where now we travel around the world in a matter of hours.
Yeah.
But to them at that time, that was it was a big thing, because you're accumulating information and trading things, right? One of the third things that the third house deals with that's connected to Gemini is
Short distance.
exchange and short distance travel.
Yeah. Short
Right.
distance travel.
Well, when you make a short distance travel, it's usually for the purpose of
Trade. Yeah.
exchange, trade, right?
Hmm.
Um, but you find that depending upon the culture, of course, right, that culture can have a what we call an asili, right, or a seed that's germinated within them that produces either war or peace,
Yeah.
but movement nonetheless.
Hmm.
Right? And so you find that the references to the Mahabharata, right, really talk about the invasions and those Caucasian hordes coming down out of the steppes of the Caucasus Mountains, which is not far from India. This is not far, folks. This is not like, you're
Yeah.
traveling, you're hundreds of miles, but it's in relative consideration to where we have now. I mean, traveling,
Well,
is
yeah. I mean, you're talking Iran.
right.
These. I mean, these are. These are next door neighbors. They're not far. Right there.
And you know what? The third house akin to Gemini rules neighbors,
Neighbors.
your neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
And so when we unpack that, right, we see that that frame really created some changes in the cultures around the world. One thing we notice is that the zone of confluence from where the northern portions of the world meet the southern portions, meaning the northern races meet the southern races.
Yeah.
And at that time, that's when a lot of intermixing began. Um, one of the things that we understand about the word Gemini in India, which is translated into, well, it's
Mina.
Mathuna.
Mathuna. Not Mina. Mathuna.
Mathuna, right? Mina is
It's
Pisces.
Pisces, yeah.
Right. Mathuna means to copulate, literally. So in the Indian tradition, or in the tradition out of India, right, it's a male and a female, not two males. So it's not necessarily twins, it's the male and female dynamic.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we see is that there is an interbreeding or intermixing that creates, if you will, even new races.
Yeah.
Right? The Arab race is a newer race. It's a byproduct of the intermixing between the southern races and the northern. And before then, in fact, most cultures were of a darker complexion.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, we find that just in reference to, very similar to the Age of Gemini, Rome says that their foundation comes from Romulus and Remus.
Yeah.
Right. And it's strange that it very closely symbolizes or resembles Gemini.
Well, I mean, what in the history, official history, right? That you have these Germanic tribes that migrated down into Italy and intermingled with the locals. You know what I'm saying? And that's what they, yeah.
And those natives, in fact, many of them, and you go to research and do a little history digging, you find that there's a culture called the Etruscans.
Yeah.
And the Etruscans were of a darker persuasion, darker skin, right?
Yeah, in official history books, they usually don't show you what the Etruscans look like.
They don't.
They usually don't. They speak about them, but they don't tell you what they look like.
There's a book called the early presence of the African presence in early Europe.
The
By
Minoans.
Runoko Rashidi. Or it might be Ivan Sertima. Ivan Sertima. That's Ivan Sertima. Runoko Rashidi wrote. No, it could be either Ivan Sertima or it's Runoko Rashidi. One of the two, if not both, because sometimes they collaborate. But in that book, they clearly show, right, that the early Italians were darker skinned. In fact, even when you go to Sicily, to this day, there's some of them in Sicily that have very brown, darker complexion. Some of the Greeks to this day still have a very olive, tone where it's not, they can tan.
Right? Well, I mean, you got the Minoan civilization from that, same thing,
And then and here's the thing, their prominent in the age of Taurus, because the in fact, the Minotaur, right,
Yeah.
comes from, right, the
Mm-hmm.
great, because Min, right, is another. It's a netter, right, in
Mm-hmm.
Kemet, and the Minoans, right. I mean, when you really get, because the Minoans, you know what they were famous for? They had bulls
Mm-hmm.
that would run, and they would do acrobatic flips over the bull.
Yeah.
The Minoans, right?
Yeah.
So, right, and that's in the age of Taurus, much later. So you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine prior to, right, those individuals were, pretty much
Well,
black.
there is a theory out there that those civilizations were actually some of them were people who left after the war, the unification between Upper and Lower Kemet.
And I could see that.
Yeah.
I could
We
see
we
that.
uh we got a Patreon question real quick, right? And it's right on topic of what we're on. How does a lesser developed civilization usurp power from an advanced older culture in reference to what we're talking about, these like, different, tribes coming down and, invading India and different things like that.
Well, you understand the Asili,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm referencing a concept out of a book called Yorugu. And if you're really into anthropology and African history, African cosmology, pick the book up. You'd be quite surprised at the information held within it. But in the book, Yorugu, it talks about um, Ogo, right? There's a myth or a story within the Dogon context, right? And Yorugu takes ideas from the Dogon kind of purview and kind of makes a African analogy or analysis of the European mindset. And from the European mindset, one of the things that we have understood is two things. One, he weaponizes everything, meaning just because he creates something on one, and you can see this to be true in that when he created, for example, or when we have, for example, gunpowder, right?
Yeah.
Right. Gunpowder was originally from China,
Mm-hmm.
and the sealy, the seed, right, inside of the individual that acquired the gunpowder, turned it into a killing machine.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing with everything. So, medicine, he takes it. He says, "Well, I'll give you a cure, but I can weaponize it at the same time." This is just the dimension of the internal core of how this being operates or moves. It's not personal.
Yeah.
And so, also, one of the telltale signs is objectification,
Mm-hmm.
separating spirit from matter, right? And so, when these lesser cultures, right, come into higher, more civilized cultures. And you must understand, civilized means civil,
Mm-hmm.
where these individuals are more oriented towards weaponizing and using things for conquest. So that's to speak to that particular kind of pattern, that when they come in, they literally shift or change the dynamic of the information that they have and use it towards usually nefarious things.
Yeah.
So that's just how things work. Um, you know, that's just everywhere it's everywhere they go, it's just the modus operandi of how things function. So when you go back in time, you don't find plethoras of weapons. You find more tools and maybe a few things here and there that talk about, defense or, you know, f- using something to defend yourself. But when we look in these ancient cultures, we find more things that are about sustaining, right? Helping you become a better civilization, like a granary,
Yeah.
right? You don't find these things in historical digs in Europe. It's just not there.
No.
And the boom of culture really started, I would say, in the Gemini age, just
Hmm.
because the dynamic of man is exchanging ideas. He's coming to a point where he realizes that language, the ability to exchange, to dialogue, to trade, um, to amalgamate, right, to
Hmm.
consolidate, all of these things, really, and that's what copulation is. When we say copulation, we don't just mean in the sense of exchange of male and female energies. I'm talking about literally when two things come together, they create a new thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what this age brings, in areas where culture is being developed now around the world. When you have talking, I mean, in Asia, in China, right? That's not to say that that's not what was happening as well. It was, but I'm talking about civilizations that have over thousands of years demonstrated the continuous development of culture.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to find outside of Africa or India.
Well, I mean, look at their environments, right? I mean, even when you take the the more Asiatic, culture. I mean, even the ones who traveled over here,
Hmm.
it's cold. It's too cold to really set your feet in. Really, I mean, even to this day, you can go to Inuits and up in northern Canada and all this area and stuff like that. I mean, they still live a relatively they kind of live kind of still back in that age to a
Yeah,
large
they do.
degree. you
They
know,
do.
it's not much you can do, so it's hard. It's a different mentality. You know, they're a little
Yeah.
bit more, you know, socially civilized and not trying to kill each other and stuff like that. But it just again, like you said, to see where that culture is, where they're fixated at. How do they translate their environment? How do they how do they see how that fits into everything?
Exactly. And, you know, as we discuss the ages, the further you go back, the harder it is to find examples of this outside of Africa.
Yeah.
I'm talking as far as development.
Hmm.
They have Gobekli Tepe, right? Gobekli Tepe.
Hmm.
That's a big thing right now in, um, the culture um, of European mental domination. They really are holding on to this because it's in Turkey,
Hmm.
right?
But I mean, Turkey. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
it's, it's, it's at that
but go back
borderline.
in time. Remember,
Yeah.
they're saying this is slightly. They're actually saying if we use the dates that they say, they're
Hmm.
claiming this is between 9 to 8,000 BC.
Okay.
This is before the age of Gemini. This is actually the age of Cancer.
Yeah.
I have not really done extensive research on Gobekli Tepe. I've done more research on Nabta Playa,
Yeah.
right? But Nabta Playa was, guess when it was established? In the age of Gemini,
Hmm.
showing that we were using stones to create direct replicas of the heavens, right? Which is a form of language, a form of writing in stone, writing using stones. You know, that's in the age of Gemini, right? So yeah, they talk about Gobekli Tepe, and
But even then,
you
though,
know,
it's not. I mean,
but
where it's at,
it's before that age of if it's before the age of Gemini, then the further back
Northerners
you
hadn't come
go,
down
the
yet.
darker they're gonna get.
Yeah, because this is still south of Caucasus Mountains,
Right.
where yeah, it's still south of the Caucasus Mountains at that point. And I'm not, we're not trying to like
Mm-mm.
write white people
Mm-mm.
out of history, but if you know anything about history, even in the past 2,000 years of this area, there's a lot of different people who came through this area. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
like, so these the modern day Turkish people are not. They have not been sitting there that whole time. Maybe they have some of the DNA from some of the original people hanging around in there somewhere. But it's been so many people so many different conquerors and Genghis, all these people that's come in through these areas over the past few thousand years. That it's not the same people. You know that for a fact.
Well, that in fact, there, if I recall, I don't know who, but someone said in Kemet that the Cometians were near the Black Sea. They're called the Colchis,
Mm,
um, and that they said even the Colchis, which you know where the Black Sea is. It's not far from the
yeah.
Caucasus Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
That they were black, that they were Egyptian, that they were African with woolly hair.
Look, look, I'm originally from Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area, right? We have a lot of those Eastern Europeans out of there, out of those areas. They're different. They look
Mhm.
different. They're built
They
different.
act different.
Even the women are built different out coming out of those
Mhm,
areas.
mhm.
You understand? Not like
They all
your
have darker hair. Mhm.
yeah, they shapely. There's a different. They're built totally different out of that area.
You're right. You're
Yep.
right. So that's that Gemini intermingling process that occurred, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, in their culture, darker skin is not something that is disdainful. It's actually they look at it from more of a respectful disposition. So, it's not far fetched to say that Turkey at that time would have been, very darker skinned people. The
Yeah.
question is, can we find representation of whom built it? And that's not something that really I haven't heard them looking for that. I mean, you would think that at this point, we need
They
to
don't
know
want
who
to know.
built it.
Yeah, I don't think they want to
Mm-mm.
know.
No,
They don't want to know.
no, not at all.
Yeah.
And so, small migrations around the world really were taking place. You know, and when you have, I remember as a child riding my bike around the city, and you would explore, and it would be like a whole new world, even within your regular area, right?
Yeah.
Your respective area, and that's kind of the same thing that was happening at that time. Is that just by meeting your neighbor or by getting ideas from another culture or sharing another maybe spiritual or religious purview, this is how Kemet forms.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The
Mm-hmm.
Kemet that we see today was being formulated in the age of Gemini, or what that we saw in the age of Taurus was being formulated in the age of Gemini.
Yeah.
And so, some of the statues, the stelas, you'll still see um, like creatures with two heads, right? And they kind of like two lion heads, and they meet like that, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
still closer to that age of Gemini. So those are remnants still of what that culture would have exhibited through later art.
Yeah.
So you know really, that's what this whole era is about. Is really the shifting over from a hunter gatherer mode of existence to something that is more stable and solid in the Taurian era. And so that 2,000 years was the shifting or the changing over from um, an older, more archaic disposition in the age of Cancer to one that is now solidified and can be really harnessed, right? The bull is an animal that you can harness its energy, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's Gemini's diffuse, it's spread, it doesn't have any concentric, force to it, whereas the bull, right, consolidates power.
So that's so we can see, because even we were just talking about this with, the unification, even though it most likely, or based on what we, what most historians settle on as far as dates, didn't occur in the Gemini era, but the unification of those two lands would make sense to be happen at the in Taurus, as opposed to the age of Gemini. Like it's a culmination of what's been kind of brewing that whole time up.
Exactly. That is one of the reasons why Kemet would take and build a temple, right, with the cornerstone of one of the older temples. Well, one of the stones from the older temples will become the cornerstone of a new temple, symbolizing that we are taking from that previous knowledge, wisdom, age, and so forth, and bringing it forth in a new fashion. And so that is exactly how we built our temples, we built our sacred places. We had an idea that the old was always responsible in some way and germinating the new idea, the new reality. So absolutely 100% correct in that particular unification, right, was preset, right before. In fact, what we say 4100 is a really solid area for when 0 degrees Gemini was right on March 21st. So
Yeah.
moving forward in time, it's just an inevitable process. You have language, right? You have cultures. The Nile has been teeming with different types of peoples, and they're consolidating, right? And so, at the age of Taurus, the golden age, if you will, that's when we see, the boom, right, of Egypt.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, as always, thank you all for tuning in. This episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group, Caliprucia Astrology, and our good people on Patreon and whatnot. It's a good dynamic, I mean, when you're listening and watching and stuff like that, answering questions in the flow of the show, it brings a good dynamic into the show. So I want to see some more of that for sure. So we're gonna try to make sure we can link it up and make sure we can get more people involved in different things like that. So definitely thank you for doing that for sure. Rod, you got anything that you want to say to the people before we get out of here?
Just keep spreading the show. Definitely give us a thumbs up or a like. Subscribe. Let's keep it going, because this is just a momentum, and so next season, right, we're going to get into some deeper concepts, but we're also going to keep it to where the folks and the people can still keep up and still, walk with us as far as this astrological journey is concerned. So I just want to say to everybody, thank you for your participation and for continuing, to follow and ask questions and engage. We look forward to having this get bigger and bigger as far as spreading a good word.
Indeed. And before we get out of here, just wanted to do a little shameless plug. We got my my second short film coming up or whatnot. So stay tuned for that. You'll see some stuff start rolling out and stuff like that. So we've been working real hard, and it's getting to that point. So stay tuned for that, indeed. But as always, I want to thank you all for tuning in. This was episode 19. We will be back next week, episode 20. And everybody be safe out there. And we're out. Peace.